My name is Amara Johnson, and if you're hearing this, it means I survived something my own blood never wanted me to walk away from. At 67, I thought I had already weathered the hardest storms life could throw, at a black woman born in the South, and rebuilt in the desert heat of Phoenix, Arizona. I had clawed my way from a warehouse clerk to the COO of the logistics empire my late husband built, and when he passed, he left me not just a name, but a fortune, one that came with shadows darker than the desert nights. I should have known family dinners that turn into legal conversations were a bad omen. But when my only son Marcus called with that smooth voice of his, saying, "Mama, let's celebrate you getting back on your feet," I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe blood still meant something. I wanted to believe love didn't have a price tag. But standing on that yacht at Lake Pleasant, with Tiana flashing that Instagram smile, and Marcus pouring one too many mimosas, the air tasted wrong. And then came the questions. Not about my health, not about my joy, but about my will, my trust, and whether I'd thought about making things easier for them when the time came. That was the moment I felt the floor tilt, not from the waves, but from betrayal. People think death sneaks up on you. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes from the hand you once held crossing the street, from the child you raised and believed would carry your name with honor. And when I felt that push on my back, gentle but final, I understood. My son didn't want to inherit my lessons, my grit, or my love. He wanted my billions. I hit the water hard, lungs burning, mind screaming. But one thought anchored me through the cold. If this is my end, they don't get the last word. I do. Marcus didn't call me often. Most of the time, he let his assistant handle the pleasantries, sending flowers on Mother's Day, a text on my birthday. Always polite, always distant. So when my phone lit up with his number that Tuesday morning, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he finally remembered I'm more than a signature on a check. "Mama," he said, his tone wrapped in honey. "We want to celebrate you, just the three of us. Me, Tiana, and you. A little cruise on the lake. Nothing fancy, just family." The words "just family" hit me harder than I expected. Since Robert died 2 years ago, my world had shrunk to doctor visits and quiet nights in the condo. My hip replacement kept me grounded, and silence filled the space Marcus never seemed to occupy. Hearing him say "celebrate" stirred something tender I hadn't felt in a while. When I arrived at Lake Pleasant Marina, the sun was bright, bouncing off the polished surface of Marcus's new yacht. 40 feet of white fiberglass luxury I knew they hadn't earned. Tiana stood on the deck, sunglasses hiding eyes that never quite smiled. She waved like we were old friends instead of 2 women circling each other since the wedding. Marcus hugged me at the dock, his cologne sharp, his grip rehearsed. "Look at you, Mama. Strong as ever," he said, but his eyes slid past me, already elsewhere. We set out across the water, the desert fading into the horizon. Tiana handed me a mimosa, her phone angled just so. She called it a selfie, but I knew better. That lens lingered on me, on my glass, on my words, as Marcus steered the boat toward open water. For a moment, I let myself believe it. Laughter, sunlight, the taste of citrus and champagne. But then Marcus leaned close, refilling my glass too quickly, his voice casual and cutting. "Mama, have you thought about making the paperwork simpler? Wills, trusts. Probate is such a hassle." That was when the air shifted, heavy as the desert heat before a monsoon. The glass slipped from my hand before I even realized Marcus had overfilled it. Champagne spilled across my dress, cold and sticky, but neither he nor Tiana moved to help. She just lifted her phone a little higher, catching every angle, every drop, every moment that might later be twisted into evidence of confusion. I set the glass down carefully, my hip aching as I pushed myself to stand. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Take me back to shore, now." That was when his mask cracked, the smile fell, his voice flat as desert stone. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Mama." Tiana stepped closer, her tone sweet enough to rot teeth. "It's for your own good. You've been forgetting things, mixing up names. The doctors all agree. You're not capable of managing billions of dollars anymore." I stared at her, the water shimmering around us like glass. "That's a lie," she shrugged, and for the first time all day her smile was genuine. "Accidents happen, Amara. Elderly woman, recent surgery, too many pills. It'll all make sense to the police." And then it came, that shove. Not violent, not dramatic, just enough to send me off balance, dress heavy with spilled champagne, shoes slipping against the deck. The sky spun, the world turned to water. Cold bit into me as I hit the lake, lungs seizing. For one disorienting second, I heard Marcus shouting, "Mama!" Oh God! Like it was all a terrible mistake. But over his voice, I caught the steady hum of Tiana's whisper into her phone, already planning the paperwork. The yacht pulled away, its white hull shrinking against the dark blue of Lake Pleasant. They weren't coming back. I kicked off my shoes, lungs screaming, hip burning, every muscle fighting against the drag of the water. One thought burned hotter than the Arizona sun. They think I'm finished. They're wrong. The lake swallowed me whole. And for a moment, I thought maybe Marcus and Tiana had won. My lungs ached. My hips screamed with every kick, and the champagne-soaked dress dragged me down like a curse. But somewhere in the dark, a stubborn voice rose inside me, the same voice that carried me through boardrooms full of men who never thought a black woman belonged there. Not today. Not like this. A beam of light cut across the waves, and then I heard it. The rough growl of a fishing boat engine. Strong arms hauled me up, half drowned and trembling, into the back of a skiff that smelled of diesel and riverweed. "Jesus, lady," the man said, wrapping me in a blanket that stank of salt and sun. What the hell happened out there? His name was Nate Yazzie, a Dene guide who ran fishing trips for tourists. His teenage nephew, eyes wide as moons, kept glancing at me like I'd crawled out of a ghost story. My family, I managed between shivers. They left me. Nate's jaw tightened. I saw that yacht tearing off like they were late for heaven. Didn't look back once. The truth sat bitter on my tongue. They think if I'm gone, the money is theirs. Nate gave me a long look, the kind that measures a soul. Then maybe we don't tell them you're still breathing. That's when I knew what had to be done. If Marcus and Tiana wanted me dead, fine. I'd give them that. I'd let them think they'd buried me in Lake Pleasant, because the dead don't scare anyone. But the undead, the mother who comes back with proof and fury, that's a different story. Nate dropped me near the back alley of a tired little motel in South Phoenix, run by a woman named Rosa Delgado, who didn't ask questions, so long as you paid cash. Wrapped in his blanket, heart still pounding from betrayal and survival, I stepped into that flickering neon lobby and made my choice. I would stay gone, officially dead. And from the shadows, I'd start writing the ending myself. The walls of Rosa Delgado's motel room were thin, the kind where you could hear every argument, every television laugh track, bleeding through from next door. I sat on the edge of the sagging bed, wrapped in a borrowed flannel shirt, staring at the glow of the old box television. The local news anchor's voice was too calm for what they were saying. "A tragic boating accident at Lake Pleasant," she read, face grave, eyes practiced. "Local businesswoman Amara Johnson is presumed dead after falling overboard during a private family outing." My name, my face, a photograph of me taken at some charity gala years ago, plastered on the screen like an obituary. Then Marcus appeared, standing before cameras outside the marina, his voice heavy with rehearsed grief. "My mama had been struggling," he said, pausing like he'd practiced in the mirror. "The surgery, the memory lapses. We were so worried." I gripped the edge of the bed so hard my knuckles turned white. Struggling? Memory lapses. He was rewriting me in real time, stripping me of my mind before the world, turning me into a confused old woman who wandered off a boat. Next came Tiana, mascara smudged just enough to look cinematic. She dabbed at her eyes and whispered, "We begged her to let us help. She just wasn't herself anymore." They weren't just burying me, they were staging me, erasing my strength, my history, my fight, and replacing it with a woman too frail to know her own name. And the world would believe them, because grief is a costume anyone can wear if they rehearse hard enough. I shut off the television and sat in silence, the motel humming around me. If I stormed into a police station now, what would I be? A wet, trembling woman with no proof, no allies, just a story against my son's crocodile tears. They'd call me delusional, exactly what Marcus and Tiana wanted. So I reached for the notebook Rosa had left on the nightstand, its pages lined and clean. With a shaky hand, I wrote the first words of what would become my plan. Make a list. Everyone who touched Robert's estate since he died. Someone sold me out. The list grew fast. Lawyers, accountants, bankers, every so-called trusted advisor who had handled Robert's empire after he died. Names filled the page, each one a possible traitor. But I knew Robert better than anyone, and I knew he never believed in putting all his eggs in one basket. He was cautious, paranoid even. That paranoia had saved us more than once. Maybe, just maybe, it could save me now. I still had the key. A tiny brass thing I'd kept hidden inside the lining of my jewelry box, stitched under velvet, where even Marcus wouldn't think to look. Robert gave it to me once on a quiet night, his voice low like he was telling me a prayer. "If anything ever happens, Amara, remember this isn't the only life raft. Look deeper." At dawn, I slipped out of the motel and took a cab across town to a bank in downtown Phoenix, the kind of place old money preferred. Marble floors, ceilings too high for the desert heat. The safety deposit clerk raised an eyebrow when I handed over the key, but said nothing. A signature, a turn of the lock, and the box was mine. Inside was a plain envelope. No jewelry, no bearer bonds, just a letter in Robert's tidy handwriting. My breath caught as I unfolded it. "My love," it began. "If you are reading this, it means the world turned on you the way it always threatened to. I could never protect you from greed, but I can give you a shield. Enclosed are access codes to the Phoenix Ascendant Trust. Assets total $2 billion. You alone may access them, unless you are deemed legally incompetent. Guard this with your life. It was built for you." Beneath the letter was a flash drive, heavy like it carried the weight of our entire marriage. $2 billion. Enough to rebuild, enough to fight back, enough to destroy anyone who thought they could erase me. I pressed the envelope to my chest, tears burning my eyes. Marcus and Tiana wanted me gone for money. They thought they already controlled. But Robert had left me more than wealth. He had left me a weapon. By midnight, I was back in Encanto Palmcroft, the old neighborhood where Robert and I had raised Marcus. The streets were too quiet, those Spanish-tiled roofs standing like silent witnesses to everything I'd lost. I still had my original house key. Funny thing, Marcus never thought to ask for it back. Maybe he assumed I was too sentimental, too broken to ever use it again. He should have known better. I slipped in through the back door, heart hammering like I was breaking into a stranger's house. But this had been my home. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall felt familiar and foreign all at once. Robert's study smelled different now. Expensive cologne, printer ink, power. That's where I found it. The desk was neat, but not neat enough. A folder lay open, stamped with a title that made my stomach twist. Project Amaryllis. My name, rebranded as a blueprint for my own erasure. I flipped through the pages, each one colder than the last. Notes about my supposed memory decline. Photos from the hospital after my hip surgery, when I was still groggy on medication. Reports of erratic behavior at social events. Fabricated, twisted versions of harmless moments. They had been building a case for over a year, painting me as incompetent, preparing the courts to strip me of control. And then there was the timeline. Phase 1, establish signs of dementia. Phase 2, secure power of attorney. Phase 3, final resolution. I snapped photos with a disposable camera I'd bought at a gas station, my hands trembling. Every click of the shutter was proof that Marcus and Tiana weren't just greedy. They were methodical. That's when I heard it. A sound so small it almost didn't belong in that house anymore. A cry. Thin, high-pitched, unmistakable. A baby. My blood froze. Marcus and Tiana had never said a word about children. I moved closer, careful not to make a sound, and the cry rose again from the guest bedroom. There, beneath the weight of betrayal and conspiracy, a new layer of the mystery unfolded. This wasn't just about money anymore. They had a baby, and I needed to know whose. I couldn't do this alone. Surviving Lake Pleasant had already shown me the limits of my body, and what I'd seen in Robert's study told me Marcus and Tiana were playing on a level far beyond family betrayal. They weren't just greedy children. They had help. Professional help. If I wanted to win, I needed someone who could play dirtier than they did, and smarter. That's how I found DeShawn Carter. Rosa gave me his number with a shake of her head. "He used to wear a badge," she said. "Now he wears whatever pays the bills. But if you need somebody who doesn't flinch at ugly truths, he's your man." We met in a diner off Van Buren, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since the Carter administration. DeShawn slid into the booth across from me. Tall, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples but sharp-eyed, the kind of man who saw angles where others saw walls. "You want me to tail your son?" he asked, stirring sugar into his coffee without ever looking away. "I want you to tell me what he's hiding," I said, "and I want the truth, not the story he's selling on television." By the end of the week, DeShawn had delivered. Photographs spread across Rosa's kitchen table like a crime novel. Marcus and Tiana entering a sleek glass building in Scottsdale, its sign reading Sonoran Fertility Institute. Receipts showed cash payments, large ones. DeShawn even had a blurry shot of Tiana meeting a woman in a tailored suit, auburn hair cut sharp, shaking her hand like they'd just sealed a deal. "This isn't about IVF," DeShawn said flatly. "It's about paperwork. They're buying themselves an heir, the kind who comes with a clean birth certificate and no questions asked." I picked up one of the receipts, the numbers swimming. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from rage. First, they tried to erase me. Now they were building a new legacy on top of my grave. DeShawn leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever this is, it's big. And whoever that redhead is, she's no ordinary lawyer. She's the kind who cleans up after people like Marcus." I knew then this wasn't just a family scandal. It was a machine. And I had just put my hand on one of its gears. DeShawn's photos gave me a destination, but my gut told me to start somewhere closer, inside my own stolen house. That baby's cry haunted me, thin and insistent, like a thread pulling me toward the truth. If Marcus and Tiana had gone so far as to buy an heir, then someone had to be taking care of him. That someone might be my way in. Her name was Kayla Moore, a licensed nurse barely in her 30s. DeShawn dug up her file. Single mom, steady employment history, no priors. She looked like the kind of woman who took the night shift to pay rent and still showed up to her kid's soccer game with orange slices, which meant she probably had no idea what she was caught up in. I waited until Marcus and Tiana left for one of their grief meetings. That's what DeShawn called them. Meetings with lawyers and bankers, where they rehearsed their tragic act. Then I walked up to my own front porch, the key still warm in my pocket, and rang the bell. Kayla answered with a baby on her hip, eyes tired but kind. She blinked at me like she was seeing a ghost, and in a way, she was. "Mrs. Johnson," she whispered, "you're supposed to be dead," I finished for her. "Yes, I've seen the news too. May I come in?" She hesitated, rocking the baby, then stepped aside. Inside, my home smelled different. Sterile wipes, baby powder, formula. The living room I used to host Christmas in had become a nursery, expensive toys piled in corners. I sat down, keeping my voice steady. "Kayla, I need you to listen carefully. That child is not Marcus and Tiana's. He was bought. His mother was a teenager who died under suspicious circumstances at Sonoran Fertility. Her face drained of color. That can't be true. They told me—" "I know what they told you," I cut in. "I also know what I found in Robert's study, a project designed to erase me, to steal everything my husband built, and to use that baby as the crown jewel. If you stay silent, you're part of it. If you help me, you can save him, and yourself." The baby gurgled then, eyes wide and unknowing. Kayla pressed her lips together, torn between fear and conscience. Finally, she whispered, "What do you want me to do?" And just like that, I had my first ally inside the walls of my old life. Kayla had barely agreed to help when I made the riskiest move of my life, walking straight back into the lion's den. I told her to stay quiet, to act as if nothing had changed, while I waited in the den that used to be my living room. My heart thundered like I was 20 again, standing on stage at my first board meeting, except this time the stakes weren't quarterly earnings. They were life and death. The door opened, voices spilling in. Marcus low and measured, Tiana sharp as broken glass. Their laughter stopped when they saw me sitting in Robert's old armchair, legs crossed, hands steady. "Hello, darlings," I said, smiling the way a ghost might. "Surprised?" Tiana dropped her purse, eyes wide. Marcus froze in the doorway, color draining from his face. "Mama," he whispered like the word was poison. "You planned a beautiful funeral," I continued. "Shame you'll have to cancel the refunds." For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then Marcus stepped forward, shaking his head like he could erase me with denial. This isn't real. You drowned. Do I look drowned to you?" I snapped. "Or do I look like a woman who knows her own son tried to murder her for money?" The mask slipped. Marcus's jaw clenched. Tiana's lips curled into something colder than fear. "You shouldn't have come back," she hissed. That was when Marcus moved, quick, desperate, his hand shoving against my shoulder just like he had on the boat. I stumbled back, catching myself against the armrest, pain flaring through my hip. Kayla screamed from the hallway, the baby crying in her arms. The sound cut through the air like a blade, snapping Marcus back for half a second. Long enough for me to grab the recorder in my pocket and click it on. "I have proof," I said, my voice steady despite the terror hammering my chest. "Every word you say now is one step closer to prison." Marcus's eyes darted toward Tiana, then back to me. Rage, panic, calculation, too many emotions at once. "This isn't over," he spat. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I hadn't scared them into retreat. I had provoked them into war. After my staged confrontation with Marcus and Tiana, I knew two things for certain. They weren't giving up, and I couldn't fight this battle as just a mother betrayed. I needed to understand the machine behind them, the one feeding them scripts, forging documents, cleaning up their messes. That meant putting DeShawn back in play. We met again at the diner off Van Buren, but this time his table was covered in files, photographs, and coffee-stained notes. He slid a photo across to me, the auburn-haired woman I'd glimpsed shaking Tiana's hand. "Miranda Torres," he said, "estate lawyer, partner at Torres & Klein. On the surface, she handles trusts for old money families, but when you dig deeper, she's something else entirely." I studied the image. Miranda looked ordinary enough. Professional smile, sharp suit, the kind of woman you'd trust to notarize your will. That was what made her dangerous. DeShawn tapped a folder. I cross-referenced her cases with death certificates. Over the past 5 years, 20 wealthy seniors in Arizona and Nevada died under circumstances that looked neat. Too neat. Falls, overdoses, boating accidents. In every single case, Miranda handled the transfer of assets. Families got rich. No investigations stuck. The words chilled me. It wasn't just my son's betrayal. It was a pattern, a network feeding off people like me. "She runs it like a business," DeShawn continued. "Families come to her with greed. She provides the roadmap. Medical records get altered. Doctors get leaned on. Banks look the other way. By the time the victim accidentally dies, everything's locked up tighter than a vault." I thought of Robert's letter. His paranoia turned into protection. Maybe he had seen the shadows too. Maybe he'd known Miranda's kind was circling even before Marcus showed his teeth. DeShawn leaned closer, his voice low, I don't think Marcus and Tiana had the brains to plan this. They're pawns. Miranda's the queen. The files in front of me were damning. Photos of Miranda at hospitals, courtrooms, even charity galas, always near families with something to gain, and someone elderly in the way. I felt my chest tighten, not just with anger, but with clarity. Then we don't just fight Marcus and Tiana, I said slowly. We tear down the whole damn board. DeShawn smiled grimly. Now you're talking my language. By the time dawn crept over Phoenix, I'd stopped thinking of this as a family feud. Marcus and Tiana had set the fire, but Miranda Torres was the one pouring gasoline. If I wanted to survive, and make sure no other family ended up gutted like mine, I needed her to expose herself. That meant baiting her into a trap she couldn't resist. DeShawn and I sketched it out over diner coffee, napkins covered in scribbles like we were plotting a heist. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in execution. Make Miranda believe I was ready to negotiate. She's greedy, DeShawn said, tapping his pen. People like her think they're smarter than everyone else. If you walk in with the right carrot, she'll bite. And the carrot? I asked. He slid Robert's letter across the table, the one with the access codes to the hidden $2 billion trust. This. You don't show her the money. You show her the possibility of it. Dangle it like a prize, and she'll come running. The idea made my stomach twist. Robert's legacy wasn't just money. It was our life, our sweat, our love. But I understood the game. If Miranda wanted to play with lives, I'd make her believe she finally found the jackpot. We decided the meeting would happen at my old house. Symbolic, dangerous, but perfect. Marcus and Tiana would be eager to parade their incompetent mother in front of Miranda one last time, thinking she'd put the nail in my coffin. Instead, every word, every move would be recorded. I looked at DeShawn, his face calm but eyes sharp. And if she doesn't take the bait, he smirked, she will. People like Miranda can't resist the scent of blood and money mixed together. It's her perfume. I nodded, clutching Robert's letter against my chest. I'd already survived drowning. Now it was time to see if I could survive walking straight into the fire. Preparation became my armor. If I was going to step into the lion's den again, I needed eyes, ears, and allies in every corner of that house. Marcus thought he had stripped me of everything, my wealth, my power, even my dignity. But he underestimated the one thing he could never erase, my will to fight back. I started with Kayla. She was nervous, but once she held that baby close and whispered, "He deserves better than this," I knew she was in. We spent hours mapping out the house, marking blind spots, figuring out where cameras could hide without drawing attention. DeShawn supplied the gear. Tiny, button-sized recorders, motion-triggered video cams no bigger than a matchbox. Then came Rosa Delgado. She wasn't just a motel owner. She was a survivor of her own battles. A woman who had raised 4 kids alone after her husband disappeared into the prison system. Rosa didn't flinch when I asked for her help. "Mija," she said, pressing her hand over mine. "You don't go to war without family. Tonight, I'm yours." We smuggled the equipment into the house one piece at a time, hidden in diaper bags and grocery sacks. Kayla played her part perfectly, distracting Marcus and Tiana with stories about baby schedules, while Rosa and I tucked cameras into vents, behind bookshelves, under tables. Every corner of that house became a silent witness. The final touch was psychological, not technological. Rosa suggested we leave subtle signs. Little things only Marcus would notice. My old scarf draped over the armchair. A framed photo of Robert and me moved from the attic back to the mantel. Just enough to make him feel my ghost breathing down his neck. When we were done, I stood in Robert's study, looking around at the home that had been turned into a stage for betrayal. Now it was my stage. "This house started as mine," I whispered, "and it'll end as mine." Kayla placed the baby gently in his crib. Rosa adjusted one of the hidden cameras, and DeShawn checked the recorder in his pocket. We weren't just setting a trap. We were writing the script for Miranda's downfall. The night of the meeting, the air in Phoenix felt heavier, like even the desert was holding its breath. I sat in Robert's armchair, the one piece of furniture Marcus hadn't dared throw out, waiting as headlights crawled up the driveway. Marcus entered first, his voice sharp with disbelief when he saw me. "Mama, you should have stayed gone." Behind him came Tiana, her smile brittle as glass, and then her, Miranda Torres. She looked smaller than I expected, her auburn hair cut in precise angles, her suit a shade too expensive for the Arizona heat, but her eyes, cold, calculating, belonged to a predator who had fed off other people's lives for too long. "Mrs. Johnson," she said smoothly, as if we were meeting for coffee, not plotting my second death. What a surprise. Or perhaps not. Women like you don't go quietly. "I suppose you'd know," I shot back. "You've shepherded plenty into early graves, haven't you?" Marcus flinched, but Miranda didn't. She just smiled, sliding her leather folio onto Robert's desk. "Let's not be dramatic. Families come to me with problems. I solve them. You were a problem, Amara. Too stubborn, too sharp, too unwilling to hand over the keys. But every lock has a key. Every queen can be toppled. And every empire can crumble," I said, leaning forward, "especially when it's built on fraud, forged medical records, and bodies that pile up a little too neatly." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she turned to Marcus and Tiana. "See? She's sharper than you said. Dangerous. If we don't resolve this tonight, she'll bury us all." That was when I knew the trap was working. Every word was being captured by DeShawn's hidden recorders, every confession sealed in digital amber. I stood, letting my voice fill the room that had once been my home. "You can plan my funeral 100 times, Miranda, but this time, you're the guest of honor." For the first time, her smile faltered. The silence in that room stretched so tight, it could have snapped. Miranda's eyes drilled into me, cold and calculating, while Marcus shifted on his feet like a boy caught cheating on a test. Tiana clutched her purse like it was a life raft. Mascara smudged, but her smile still rehearsed. "You should have stayed under that water," Miranda said finally, her voice soft, lethal. "Now I have to make this messy." I tilted my head, meeting her gaze. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." And that's when the front door burst open. Shouts filled the air. "FBI! Hands where I can see them!" And the room exploded into motion. Agents swarmed in through every entrance, black jackets and drawn weapons turning my home into a crime scene, lit by flashing red and blue. Miranda tried to bolt, but DeShawn stepped out from the hallway, gun leveled with the calm precision of a man who'd worn the badge before. 2 agents tackled her before she could reach the back door, the leather folio spilling across the floor, papers scattering like fallen leaves. Marcus froze, his hands half raised, torn between surrender and defiance. "Mama, I didn't—" "Save it," I snapped. My voice cut sharper than I intended, but it was the only thing holding me upright. "You tried to bury me once. Now you can explain yourself to a judge." Tiana screamed when the cuffs clicked around her wrists, her perfect performance unraveling in an instant. The same woman who'd whispered about accidents now pleaded with the agents, insisting she was just a victim. Miranda, though, stayed silent, her face twisted into something almost amused. "You think this ends with me?" she hissed as they dragged her past. "You don't even know how deep it goes." Maybe she was right. Maybe her network stretched further than we knew. But in that moment, with the cameras still hidden in the walls, and the agents securing every scrap of evidence, I knew I had done what Robert's billions never could. I had survived. I had fought back. And I had won the first battle of a much bigger war. The house that once held birthdays and Christmas mornings now smelled of latex gloves and fingerprint powder. Agents moved in and out, collecting boxes of evidence, cataloging every piece of paper Miranda Torres had left behind. It should have felt like victory, but as I stood in the doorway of Robert's old study, all I could feel was the hollow echo of what had been lost. Marcus sat cuffed at the dining table, shoulders slumped, eyes glassy. He didn't look like the son I had raised. Didn't look like the boy who used to race his bike down Palm Lane or fall asleep on my lap after Sunday church. He looked like a stranger. Tiana, beside him, wore fury on her face, spitting protests about setups and conspiracies. But Marcus just looked broken. "Mama," he said, his voice cracked, childlike. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I studied him, searching for the boy I remembered, the one Robert had hoped would inherit not just the business, but the values that built it. All I found was a man who had traded love for greed and loyalty for power. "You meant every step," I said quietly. "The push on the boat, the lies on television, the baby in that crib you thought would erase me. You meant it all." He dropped his head, and for a moment I thought I saw regret flicker across his face. But regret was too late. Regret couldn't bring back Sarah Collins, the teenage girl who had died to make his plan possible. Regret couldn't erase the months of betrayal he'd spun like silk around me. An agent touched my arm gently. "Mrs. Johnson, we'll be taking them downtown. You've done more than enough." As they led Marcus past me, he looked up one last time, his lips trembling. "Will you ever forgive me?" The answer rose in my chest, heavy as stone. Forgiveness was something sacred, something earned. And Marcus hadn't just failed me. He'd tried to end me. I didn't speak. I let the silence answer for me. When the door closed behind him, I turned back to Robert's study. The papers were gone, the desk bare, but I could almost hear his voice. "If anything ever happens, Amara, remember, you're stronger than they think." For the first time since Lake Pleasant, I let myself breathe. Courtrooms have a way of stripping people bare. No chandeliers, no flowers, no soft lighting, just 4 walls, a gavel, and the truth. Weeks after the raid, I found myself sitting in Maricopa County Superior Court, staring across at lawyers who had once called me ma'am, with fake smiles, and now whispered about my competency, like I wasn't even in the room. But this time, I wasn't alone. DeShawn sat behind me, Steady as stone, Rosa had taken off work to be there, her hand resting warm on my shoulder. And Kayla, with the baby in her arms, stood ready to testify. The judge listened as the FBI laid out Miranda's operation. Dozens of families, millions stolen, elderly victims dead under accidents that no longer looked accidental. My will, the forged one Marcus tried to pass off, was entered into evidence right beside the real one Robert and I had signed. Every lie crumbled under the weight of the truth. When the gavel came down, it wasn't just a ruling, it was restoration. Robert's $2 billion trust was affirmed as mine, beyond Marcus and Tiana's reach. For the first time since the lake, I felt like I could stand without shaking. But money was only part of what I'd come to reclaim. The bigger fight was for the child who had been at the center of it all. The courtroom grew hushed when Kayla carried him forward, his tiny fists wrapped around her sleeve. The judge looked at me over her glasses. "Mrs. Johnson, are you prepared to assume guardianship of this child?" I rose, every ache in my body fading under the weight of that moment. "Yes, Your Honor. His name will be Robert Sarah Johnson, for the grandfather who built a legacy of resilience, and the young mother who gave her life bringing him into the world." The gavel struck again, and just like that, family meant something new. Not Marcus's lies, not Tiana's greed, not Miranda's empire of shadows, but this baby, Kayla, Rosa, DeShawn, the people who had chosen to stand when the world tried to drown me. As we left the courthouse, the Arizona sun spilled over us, bright and relentless. I held the baby close, whispering into his dark curls, "You'll grow up knowing the truth, and you'll grow up loved. That's a promise." For the first time in years, I felt free. It's strange, the way survival reshapes you. Before Lake Pleasant, I thought strength meant building an empire with Robert, balancing spreadsheets and contracts until midnight, making sure our family never knew hunger or struggle. But the kind of strength I discovered after Marcus pushed me into that water was different. It wasn't about wealth or power. It was about the raw instinct to rise, even when every hand around you was pressing you down. 5 months have passed since the trial. Marcus and Tiana are behind bars, facing years they'll never buy their way out of. Miranda Torres is in federal custody, her empire of polished lies dismantled piece by piece. The newspapers call me the widow who wouldn't drown. I don't mind the nickname. It reminds me that sometimes survival itself is the sharpest form of revenge. But my life now is less about revenge and more about rebuilding. Mornings begin with the sound of Robert Sarah's laughter, echoing through the condo that once felt too quiet. Kayla comes by often, more like family than an employee. And Rosa insists on cooking Sunday dinners big enough for half the block. Even DeShawn drops in sometimes, pretending it's business when it's really just to make sure I'm still standing. I keep Robert's letter framed on my desk, not because of the billions it referenced, but because of the last line, "You are stronger than they think." Those words carried me through the lake, through betrayal, through every courtroom and confrontation. They remind me that I am more than a widow, more than a victim. I am the author of my own ending. And yet, there are scars. Nights when I wake up gasping, certain I can still feel Marcus's shove on my back, days when I wonder if forgiveness is possible, even when I know I'll never give it. Family isn't always blood. That lesson was carved into me the hard way. So I choose a new family, one made not of obligation, but of love freely given, a baby who deserves truth, women who stood beside me, a man who risked his life to uncover the darkness. When I hold Robert Serra close and feel his small heartbeat against mine, I know we've already won, because legacy isn't about billions in a trust. It's about who you lift up when the world tries to pull you under. Some evenings, when the Arizona sky bleeds into that deep desert purple, I sit on the back porch with baby Robert Serra in my arms and think about the way life twists. A year ago, I was a woman drowning, literally and figuratively, pulled under by betrayal from the very people I'd given everything to. Now, I am the keeper of a new legacy, one that money can't measure, the inheritance Robert left me. $2 billion carefully hidden until the right moment was supposed to be a safety net. Instead, it became a weapon, one my own son tried to turn against me. That still cuts deep. But I've stopped asking why. Why he betrayed me. Why blood turned against blood. Some questions don't deserve answers. What matters is what came after. Rosa and Kayla sit with me most nights, laughing louder than I ever thought this house could hold again. DeShawn checks in with reports from the FBI, reminding me that the fight against Miranda's network is bigger than just my story and little Robert Serra. He is the center of it all. His smile is proof that light can survive even the darkest storms. I made a promise to him, and to myself. He will grow up with truth, not lies. He will know his birth mother's name, Sarah Collins, and the courage it took for a 17-year-old girl to carry him into the world. He will also know about Robert, the grandfather whose vision built a fortune, and the kind of strength it takes to protect it with honor. But most of all, he will know love. Not the twisted, conditional kind Marcus and Tiana tried to sell, but the kind that steadies you when the ground shakes. Sometimes neighbors whisper about me, about the trial, the money, the scandal. I let them say what they will. I don't live for their approval. I live for this child, for the women who stood by me, for the memory of Robert's steady hand. When the desert wind sweeps across the porch, and the boy in my arms laughs at nothing but the sound of life itself, I know this much is true. I was meant to survive. I was meant to fight. And I was meant to start over, this time with a family I chose. They call Arizona the desert, but I've learned it's a place of rebirth. Out here, the sun doesn't care what you've lost. It rises anyway, fierce and unrelenting. In some ways, I've had to do the same. When Robert died, I thought my story was over. I thought the years ahead would be quiet ones, filled with memories and maybe loneliness, but never danger. I never imagined betrayal would come from my own blood, or that I'd be forced to fight for my life, my fortune, and the truth of who I am. Yet, as I sit here today, I know that survival has given me more than it took away. I see it in Robert Serra's small hands reaching for mine. I see it in the way Rosa sets the table with laughter spilling from her chest. I hear it in Kayla's voice when she sings lullabies in the kitchen. Family didn't leave me. It simply changed its shape. The billions Robert left me are intact, but they no longer feel like the core of my identity. They're tools, nothing more. Resources to protect, to build, to heal. What matters now isn't wealth, but legacy. And legacy isn't just numbers in a trust. It's the truth we pass down, the love we guard, the resilience we teach. I've walked through fire and water both, and I've come out standing. That, I've learned, is the truest inheritance of all. If you're still with me, listening to every twist and turn of my story, then maybe you've walked through storms of your own. Maybe betrayal came from a place you never expected, or maybe life knocked you down so hard you weren't sure you'd stand again. I know that feeling. I've lived it. Here's what I want you to remember. Survival is never pretty, and it's rarely easy, but it is possible. Even when the water closes over your head, even when the people you trusted most turn into strangers, even when the world writes your obituary before you're ready to go, you can still rise. I'm not extraordinary. I'm not a superhero. I'm a woman who refused to stay buried. What saved me wasn't the billions Robert left behind, or the FBI waiting in the wings. What saved me was the decision to fight, to keep breathing, to believe that my story wasn't finished yet. So if you're reading this, ask yourself, what's the story you refuse to let end? What's the truth you'll keep alive, even when others try to silence it? Because family, legacy, love, they're not given. They're chosen, built, protected. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is simply say, I'm still here. And like the Arizona sun, you rise every single day. Some nights, when the desert cools and the stars spill across the Arizona sky, I sit with Robert's Sarah asleep against my chest, and I realize something simple. I am no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. The fear that once followed me like a shadow has finally loosened its grip. Life isn't perfect. Grief still knocks on my door from time to time, and the echo of Marcus's betrayal will never fully disappear. But I've stopped letting pain define me. Instead, I measure my days by laughter in the kitchen, by baby giggles at sunrise, by the steady hum of a life rebuilt from ashes. Robert's billions may secure the future, but they don't write it. I do. And this time, I'm writing with courage, with clarity, with love that refuses to be bought or betrayed. That's the true inheritance, the kind no one can forge, steal, or destroy. So I close this chapter not with bitterness, but with a promise. To honor Sarah Collins by raising her son with truth. To honor Robert by protecting the legacy he entrusted me with. And to honor myself by never letting anyone decide my ending for me again. This is not a story of loss. It's a story of rebirth, and it's only the beginning. Looking back on everything I endured, the betrayal, the water closing over my head, the courtroom battles, I see more than pain. I see lessons carved deep into my bones. The greatest one? That family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes, the people who carry your last name can turn against you, while strangers step in and become the ones who truly stand by your side. We live in a world where greed can twist love into something unrecognizable. My own son tried to erase me for money, but in the ashes of that betrayal, I found something far stronger. Resilience, truth, and a chosen family built on loyalty, not obligation. That's what saved me. That's what keeps me going. So here's my question for you. Who would stand beside you if the ground fell away tomorrow? Not the ones who say the right words, but the ones who show up, who fight for you, who hold on even when it costs them something. Think about that. Because knowing who your real family is, chosen or blood, can be the difference between drowning and surviving. If my story resonated with you, if it made you pause, cry, or maybe even feel a little stronger about your own battles, then I ask you this: like, comment, and share it. Tell me where you're listening from. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, because trust me, this fight isn't over. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And together, we rise, just like the Arizona sun